Second reading this morning is from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 through to 35. Found on page 90 of your Pew Bibles in the New Testament. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place, and moreover, some women in our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near to the village to which they were going, he walked on ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it. He gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking with us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. And they were saying, "The Lord is risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the word of the Lord. One would think with my movement around to different churches and camps and schools that I would know how to say goodbye without losing my voice in tears. This big card, I think I know what it's about. And I have this giant truck, you all know. And I will say you can check the carbon footprint on it. It's pretty good because it's a diesel, except locally. The card will hopefully fit in that truck. So I do want to thank you very much for such amazing welcome. I think Sherry did say it all in the joy and the way that SPNDS, the mission of SPNDS is to make this place hospitable, secure, loving, and safe. And meanwhile, the creativity and the inner life of each person is given room to expand and go beyond our comfort zones, as our confirmands say, out and beyond. And you have welcomed me like no other church, and I am grateful. Thank you. Show and tell is something younger children delight in, and I'm not sure how many teachers continue to use the old format of allowing a child to bring an object from anywhere, to share in school. And after a good show around of a stuffed animal, the latest toy or rock, the child proceeds to tell about the object and how it came to be important to him or her. And I'm sure many teachers have questioned the value of this teaching practice. Probably today, in an age of content and movement, these digressions that children's stories seem to have are often questionable. And they have probably been discontinued show and tell in many places. Does it happen at SPNDS? It does? It's probably extinct in most places, going the way of recess and chores and good handwriting and grades for comportment. Those things that our grandparents knew, and elocution, and all of those wonderful things of the turn of the century education in this country. What Teachers Universal do know, though, is that having a child care about, stand and share an aspect of their lives that is important to them is a learning goal in and of itself. As our faith journeys are here, to be able to stand and speak from our hearts with authenticity is a time-honored tradition in the confirmation program, as well as among the adults in all aspects of church here. We can use words to describe this goal of words like engagement or ownership, creativity, authenticity, with hopes that a classroom or a sanctuary can be a place where learners are the makers of meaning and knowledge, where congregants are the makers of meaning and knowledge. And in our Deuteronomy text today, we see that the other style, where one person is imparting the knowledge and making a deposit in the learners' heads, this is sometimes called the banking theory of education. This is happening in the book of Deuteronomy. The teacher, Moses, is depositing knowledge into the people of Israel, the student, and then later the student may withdraw this knowledge and use it. So in Deuteronomy, this is basically the farewell address of Moses, addressing people assembled on the plains of Moab before they enter the land of Canaan. This rite of passage. As Rabbi Everett Fox says, he is not merely giving a second law, which is what Deuteronomy literally means from the Greek, or just a copy of the Torah, but he is actually recasting Israel's mission and destiny. No book of the Torah is truer to the idea of instruction. And the central purpose of Deuteronomy is to furnish Israel with a complete order, an order of faith and life, which is the prerequisite for a prosperous existence in their new land. The command is graphic, it's comprehensive. To live these words written on your heart and soul, bound on your hand and strapped to your forehead, teaching the words of Torah all the time, living Torah, home and away, as you go to sleep and when you wake in the morning, written on your doorposts and gates, so that you see them when you're coming and going. So these words of wisdom fill your days, and the days of your children will be multiplied as long as the heavens are above the earth. An eternal command to teach and share. In the end, it looks like this method is older than the hills, A good mixture, though, of what we were talking about earlier of showing and telling. The best way to live in harmony with God's ways. Our second text from Luke is yet another farewell address, but it's a different kind of one where things are discovered, where surprises are happening. And it's where we are in our church calendar today. We're here on the Sunday after Easter, often a very low, quiet Sunday. Last week, things were triumphant, loud, and magnificent. And the brass was right next to me. I couldn't ask for a better seat. And the organ was rich with Vidor afterwards, and the singing was rich as a festival. We learned again how to answer that call and response pronouncement. He is risen. He is risen. He is risen. He is risen indeed. But today, our resurrection isn't so clear. The Jesus we see in these resurrection appearances is not the same. They're rare appearances at best, if you have the chance to see him. He comes to us in a form that is hidden. We don't always recognize him until we get to that deeper aha moment and realize the man who was just here, the person who was just there, the woman that was sitting beside me, that was Jesus. Wasn't that Jesus? A picture always cast in doubt and questions. Well, today's Easter evening story of two disciples on the road to Emmaus who meet up with a stranger is a story of showing and telling. Everyone is not sitting down in the temple at a press conference to debate this new question or these rumors. Did the resurrection really happen? You might imagine all the controversy as the rumors are packed up and picked up by various media, and it's moving along. Was he a king? Was he a failed Messiah? Was he just some peasant? Relieved after all the John the Baptist controversies that had plagued his political leadership for years, and now the Jesus controversies, King Herod thought, this is all over. I won again. I am great, and my kingdom is the only kingdom here, except for the Romans. And Pilate, with his cleanly washed hands, thought, thank God all of this rioting and protesting is now over and settled down. He's dead, and I'm not to blame. And we can get on with our commerce and our trade. Roman justice is never perfect, but Rome prevails, bringing power and peace and prosperity. The temple and the religious authorities who had a hand in this thought to themselves, whether this man was a prophet or just a revolutionary, we couldn't afford this. Rome will not put up with the riots, protests, and revolts and speaking truth to power, and the empire will crush all opposition with a vengeance. We have saved Israel from destruction. They were partly right. In the year 70 it came to pass. And to his followers it must have felt like a funeral day. The days after our loved ones have died. We've all been at that place, or most of us have, in that state of despair, shock, and grief when someone we loved is being buried or being cremated. And the realization that they are gone, really gone, sits in our gut. It's hard to eat, it's hard to sleep, and we cannot begin to make sense of it all. That hollow feeling is all we have. Well, for these disciples who were breaking all kinds of laws and followed someone who was deemed a blasphemer and a traitor to king and empire, they were probably scared to death. Our other texts point that out clearly, that they were hiding. Would they be next? Crucifixion was a regular practice of the Romans to make clear who was in charge. The man they had followed and taken great personal risks to follow had just been publicly put to death. They were defeated, crushed, and even rumors of the body disappearing or of sightings of Jesus resurrected didn't really change the danger. In fact, it may have made it worse. And then the grand disappointment of not the Messiah we thought we would have. He was executed on Friday with a sword pushed through his side and 4 large nails in his hands and feet. This Jesus, even if he came back, had been defeated. He was the loser. Yes, this week after Easter is kind of harder than all that was before because our hope is now dashed. We're left defeated with a dead God, a dead prophet, a dead teacher, who even when he rises, doesn't stay around with us, but just reaches, teaches, eats, and passes on. Our prayers are not really answered sometimes, even when we pray as fervently as possible. And the Messianic kingdom has not been initiated. So we are indeed acquainted with grief. We have been acquainted with grief our whole lives, and our ancestors have clung to the Torah through thick and thin most of the time. And they are the ones who gave us this silly hope that a Messiah would change it all. No, my friends, the world is still very hard. It's a brutal place where death wins more than life and despair more than hope. Well, this is probably how those disciples felt as they walked the dusty road to Emmaus. What were they doing walking away anyway? Hidden only as 2, not as 12. As they walked along sadly, a man joined them and began to talk about the things that had happened and how their hopes were dashed and the rumors that the women brought that angels had told them he was alive. And they even checked ourselves. There was a glimmer of hope. The tomb was empty. And then the man chides them for not understanding what happened. Kind of an old school teacher. Didn't you pay attention? And he began to teach them from the law and from the prophets. And even though it sounds like Jesus is scolding them, the lesson must have gone well, because when they reached their destination, the man began to walk on, but they urged him strongly to stay with them. And so he did. And then as they were at the table, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And then he vanished again. They started to make sense of their day, and the man who had taught them on the road was indeed the teacher they remembered. He had risen not as a triumphant king, but as the man they had always known. Even as night came on, they did the desperate, amazing thing of heading back out on the 7-mile road. They got up and went to Jerusalem in the dark, and they told the other followers about what had happened. And then he appeared again, not as the victorious king, not the winner of the battle, but the man with broken wounds in his side and hands pierced. And they ate fish together. He goes on to teach them again as they try to make sense of what happened and what is happening. And he shows them and tells them in the most ordinary way that he is indeed alive. So here we are on this week after Easter. Sometimes we've had terrible, awful things happen to us, and our prayers may even help us not to believe because they aren't always answered the way we want them to be. Money is winning. Weapons are winning. The system is winning. The environmental destruction is unfathomable. Our work and our prayers are not winning. And then we are reminded of the presence of God through the Holy Spirit, through the voice of our children, showing us something they found, telling a story of the joy in their lives, making music together, creating art together, paying attention, seeing our loved ones, and sharing with one another. By moments of truth in the midst of lies. By a deep meaning about what is important. That God is God. And when we notice, we can remember that God will always be God. And that now, though, this God isn't just way over here or way over there or only in a sanctuary, but this God is the God who walks with us, talks with us, teaches us, suffers beside us, eats with us, and revives new life when we need it, filling us with hope, empowering us with love, and sending us out with a peace that passes all understanding. Frederick Buechner may have said it best. He said, "Sacred moments, the moments of miracle, are often everyday moments which, if we do not look with more than our eyes and listen more than our ears reveal only, a garden, a gardener, a stranger coming down the road behind us, a meal like any other meal. But if we look with our hearts, if we listen with our full being and imagination, what we may see is Jesus himself." May God bless.